go. Part 2. Kick that, press that. Get that ready to go. And we can start to make it happen. Hey, a little late, people. Part 2. Part 2. Gotta have 2020 before you get a 2020. Everybody's got their smoothie. That was the homework. Get your smoothie. I got mine. You didn't see this. I post these smoothie pictures and people are like, "You really drink that?" I said, "Hell yeah, I drink the whole thing. Why do you think I'm happy?" This is how I fight the deep state right here. Look at that. They're gonna take the video down. Look at this. Look what's in there. Apples, bananas, a lot of green, deep leafy greens, avocado, walnuts. What's in that? Mint. Fresh stevia leaves, all the deliciousness. That's how you fight the deep state. Why? Because I don't need your drugs. I don't need your medicine, don't need your doctors, don't need anything. My body works the way it's supposed to. Get your smoothie every now and then. I want to go ahead and finish this up. Uh-oh, I'm getting pop-ups. What the hell is that? Trump recognizes U.S.-backed head of Venezuela opposition Juan. Oh, Lord, here we go. That's war. That's war, people. Drink your smoothies. Oh my gosh. And they still think that this is not globalism every time. It's always New World Order. Every single time. Doesn't matter who's president, doesn't matter who's in Congress, doesn't matter who's in the Senate. It's always New World Order. It's always domination, destruction, death. And we gotta let it go. Fake news? What the hell are they trying to do to me? Yeah, that's the games they play. You might not have no comments. That's just how it go. Everything looks good. I don't know why. Maybe they got a hint. Like, what's he gonna talk about? Talk about smoothies. Turn it off! Talking about smoothies. Can't have them drinking smoothies. They won't need drugs and bare aspirin and vaccines. They won't need doctor's appointments and doctors and dentists. They won't need cancer doctors and oncologists. He's gonna talk about smoothies. Break the comment so his comment section doesn't work. That's how my mind works. I'm fighting the deep state. I live healthy as I can. I eat healthy. Do the things that keep my body performing optimally. So I don't need their medical systems. All right, well, I guess they don't want to show. Hello again, hello. I see people coming in. Let me see if we're okay here. I would love to see some comments, but it looks like they done turned them off. I guess y'all done said something. Even your health care, your sick care. I don't believe in any of that nonsense. So I drink my smoothies, man. They're like, you drink the whole thing. I drink the whole thing. This is my breakfast right here. So I want to hang out with y'all. We're gonna watch. We're gonna have a watch party. A watch party. What is a watch party with me? I don't press that button. Y'all know what that button does when you press watch party? People invite me. I don't know what it is. But then again, I don't know what the stories are. They got the story thing at the top. I watch y'all stories. I have no idea what the hell it mean though. I just like, oh, stories. Like, look, Brother Joe got a story. What the hell is that? I click on it like, oh, that's pretty cool. And you click on it again, you can't watch it. I don't know what that means. But what I want to talk about. I want to talk about smart part 2. Not really smoothies. You know better. You're an adult. You know to eat your deep green leafy things. You know that. You know you can't survive on barbecue chicken, ribs, grilled baked beans, and bacon. You know you'll die. You'll know you need your deep state. They know how to get you cheered 2020 because you need your drugs. You need your doctor because you're eating poison. And all of that pesticide, herbicide. All right, anyway, that's not what I want to talk about. I guess the comments just ain't gonna work. They said no comments. Somebody says something they didn't like. Well, you know what? I could try something. Hang on. Maybe I'll try something. I don't see any comments. Come on, man. Come on, Facebook. How's everybody doing today? We're gonna watch something. We're gonna watch a little Assange today. I promised that earlier. Someone asked me a while ago. I think I promised that before. Okay, click the button right there, and the comment's supposed to pop up. They're not popping up. I can see you over here. All right, we just gotta roll like this. Fake book, fake news. That's just how it goes. There we go. All right, I don't care. You don't want the comments to work over here. I don't care. They know I care. That's why they do it. It's a psyop. They're just messing with me like, you know, he care. You know he care. You know, they sitting back in the data center watching right now like, he care. The NATO line's like, oh, he care. He's sad. Now he ain't got no comments on the side screen. Ah, you bastard. I'm going to tell people to drink smoothies and get healthy so we can't get them. That's okay. I'm going to cry later, but that's all right. Right now, I'm going to keep laughing. I want Brother Assange to speak. So what was I talking about earlier? I was talking about Assange. I was talking about adjusting your lenses. Adjusting your lens to see clearer. See clear now that the rain is gone and you can see that the mainstream media lies to you about everything. Try to see clear. Get your 2020 working before you start posting about 2020. And you may not want to post about 2020. That's kind of where I am. I don't have my 2020, but I'm 19, 17. I'm getting there. I got to make some more friends. Anybody know any Aborigines? Anybody know any of the Blackfeet tribe? Anybody know anybody in the Republic of Zimbabwe? Once I get all my people in, then I'll have my 2020 and I can look at the whole world, make some sense. Then I can make some good decisions without looking like a fool. That's what I mean by 2020. You want to have clear vision. There's the electron microscope behind me. Y'all know what this is? Anybody know what this is? Class, do y'all know? Does it say what is it cheating? No, it doesn't say who he is. Does anybody know who that is? Y'all know who that is? Somebody might have already posted it. Now I can see the comments. Tequila shots, no, Anna, that's not a tequila shot. Coconut, no, Lori, that's not a coconut. No, Mary, that's not a smoothie, but they are in your smoothies. Part of why your smoothie is healthy. It's a tardigrade. Tardigrade. That's the species that lives in space. It lives in your moss, lives in your microgreens, it's on your lettuce when you buy it in your salad. And the interesting part about having an electron microscope and now looking at the life that we couldn't see is now we can apply it to how you don't see life in the trailer park. You don't see poor people in the trailer park. You don't see nobody white skin poor anywhere. And the other side, they don't see no black people with poor in the ghetto, and they don't see none of that. But now you can see. You didn't see no poor starving kids in Yemen, but now all my friends posting pictures of poor kids in Yemen starving. Buy your 2020 pick. Now you can see. You don't need an electron microscope. But now you can start to see the tardigrades and do the studies and realize who they are, where they come from, why they're here, that they can live in space. Force dust. They live in space, y'all. It's tardigrades. They can go out in space. Why would a species on the planet Earth that lives in your microgreens know how to live in space? Because they're from space. Oh, all life, panspermia, where they come from, makes you intelligent to have 2020. Now you can look up at the night sky and not be scared when you see the lights and the UFOs coming down. Now you know what's going on. You know that life is everywhere. So, but you gotta have 2020. That's just an analogy. 2020 vision is important. You only have 2020 vision when you want to actually see the bigger picture. Always when you want to see the picture from 30,000 feet, everybody's plights. And that's what I think Assange brings to the table. So I want to let Assange speak. I wanted to process his last video, his last statement before they shut him off. And the exact point at where they shut him off, he was talking about space force, micro dust, let's say smart dust, micro dust, same thing. You don't want it in your body. It's you got smoothies, you got this stuff right here. This is what keeps you healthy, your immune system. You don't need smart dust and micro dust, and damn sure don't need the deep state control it in there. Oh, we're gonna kill his cancer. Did y'all see the earlier video? People taking in the micro robots. Where your elites and billionaires are gonna come save your life. They're gonna destroy your leukemia and they're gonna get rid of your cardiovascular disease. Not kill you, control you, make you a clone and start the zombie apocalypse. All right, comments ain't gonna work. Is he gonna drink that whole thing? Yeah. I'm gonna drink the whole thing. This is my breakfast. Somebody make some jokes. You're gonna be pooping later. I know poop is healthy. You're supposed to poop multiple times a day. You gotta get it out. I'm be peeing too. It's healthy. You don't want to keep that in you. If you're pooping once a day, you're gonna die, people. All right, so anyway, let's go. And the good thing is I can make myself disappear and I can cut it off. I can go do what I need to do and come back. All right, we're gonna listen to Assange for a minute. Very important. Why is Assange important? Because Assange has a 3D view of the world. He's got people in MI6 sending him documents. He's got people, are the Spence not still around? The Russians, the secret dudes, they sending him messages. He's got people in the NSA sending messages. That's why it's important, because he has a global view, which is why he talks about the human race. If you don't have a 2020 view, like Assange, you don't know a lot of people, a lot of what's happening in different parts of the world, then you can't have a 2020. Sorry. I want to process it. I'm going to let him talk, disappear, come back, and we'll have some commentary.
Interesting problem to me, which was to know the fate of man, to know the fate of mankind, insofar as that development of man is revealed by the development of his institutions and how they actually behave in practice internally. And the great political struggle of mankind, insofar as it's been rational, and we all know politics is largely irrational. But the irrational part, I feel, is sort of random. And the rational part is based upon what we know about ourselves, what we know about each other, and what we know about how human resources are distributed and how human institutions behave and what sort of internal and external rules we engage in. So that's the purpose of WikiLeaks, to try and understand mankind, and then from that we can perhaps produce a better, or more realistically put, worse human civilization. But that's changing. Mankind, in some sense, just having a small glimmer of understanding about how it is progressing through the world, I think is now almost completely eliminated. And not in the way that I expected. We actually have access to much more knowledge about how we work than we ever did before. But it's being eliminated through the speed of informational processing, and therefore the speed of the change of knowledge. And that is rapidly moving into that algorithmic processing of knowledge is moving into artificial intelligence. And why artificial intelligence is just another kind of algorithm, I think the scale changes that have occurred in the last 7 years are significant enough to classify it as a qualitative change.
Pause for a minute. A qualitative change. 2 T's in there, might have been 3. That means it's kind of important. So he started WikiLeaks to help the human race. Why? Because no secrets is what's most important to the race if you're human. Now, if you're subhuman, he's not talking to you. He's talking to the human race. He realizes that secrecy is why we are where we are. Secrecy is what's behind division and ignorance. If you can keep details and important information from people, no matter how educated they are, no matter how many degrees they got, you can make them dumb as a bag of bricks. And so he started WikiLeaks to help humanity. Why? To take all the information that's hidden from people, from your classified projects and your deep state death projects, and put them in the public light. So he did it for you. So if he is a traitor to anything, it's not the human race. Could be a traitor to America, could be a traitor to Britain, could be a traitor to France, could be a traitor to Russia, but he's a hero for the human race. Hero for the human race. Why? Because he did it for the human race. The more information you have, the better you are off. And he started off the conversation with AI. Why? Because he sees certainly what I see, which is there is a qualitative change that is occurring in the world. People say automation's always been here, humans have always had jobs, but there is a difference between AI and any sort of automation that's ever been created in the history of the human race. You now have the ability for software to actually learn how to do your job and learn that it should be learning about doing more of your jobs. That is the qualitative difference that we have right now, which is why he started off the conversation with AI. There's something very important that the human race is not seeing. And there's a very important reason behind why he is terrorist number one to your elites.
And that qualitative change means a serious, in my view, very serious threat to the stability of human civilizations. Not that they should be too stable. And the ability for human beings to organize their fate in an intelligent manner. So I think you guys, in both these two dimensions, are able to do something.
Can you organize your fate in an intelligent manner if you don't have all the details? If you don't have 20/20 vision, you got 15/14, 15 -2, -22/32. Can you see where to go? Can you see the steps? Do you see the pothole? Can you drive a car? Can you do anything intelligent if you don't have all the details? No, you can't. Can you pick a 20/20 if you don't know what's going on? No, you shouldn't. That's called being stupid. So that's his purpose. What is it like spending every day in the embassy? It's like what it should be.
The interesting stuff I can't describe because I'm in an adversarial relationship with a number of states, a really serious adversarial relationship. And then the situation for detained people, and I have been detained in prison under house arrest and in this embassy without charge at any time in this country for almost 8 years now. And the difficulty for people who are detained in one form or another is monotony, absolutely. So I try and make each day as different as possible, as it possibly can be. And it's never different enough for me.
It's never different enough. It's torture.
There's a shifting geopolitical constellation as far as the operations of WikiLeaks and other publishers are concerned that are trying to push the envelope. WikiLeaks is designed in its structure, well, because it kind of suits the sort of things I like doing, to be the boldest but still credible publisher. It's an interesting tension, that but still credible. By that, I mean, we're very bold, not so bold that we publish child pornography. That would certainly be bold, but it's not, I think, interesting and credible.
I'm gonna pause for a minute again. He said he's an adversary to many states. Is being an adversary to your state an adversary to you? Or is he an adversary to the state? How does your mind work? Are your betters better than you? Do your betters own you? Do they rule you? Are you a nationalist for the better corporations that run your betters? Or is he doing a service to your state? Yes, he should be an adversary to the state, especially if the state is murderous. But that's not an adversary to you unless you're gaslit enough to think that you actually run your state and own your state and not massive corporations, that they haven't eviscerated your constitution and own you. So he's doing a service for you. I want to see someone post something gaslit about he's a traitor. I don't see that yet. Nobody yet. I'd love to pull y'all in. I can't pull it in. Assange is a traitor. Where is he at? He's an adversary to the state and the most significant enemy of the state that's murdering the human race. Hero. I don't see anybody. How come when I'm not around, y'all post all the time how Assange is a traitor? I don't see Assange is a traitor anywhere on the feed. Nowhere on the feed. Okay, good. Y'all listening. All right, let's keep going. Maybe we got an enlightened population here.
Coming out of my experience with dealing with governments and the computer security industry, I got into encryption. I became an encryption engineer and ran a number of small companies and consultancies. And after a while, I viewed that the universe was hard enough to understand for human beings without going around encrypting it all the time. And that in some sense that was to make human life harder to understand. And while I understood, and even in fact come back, I suppose, to embrace that earlier philosophical position of mine, that in a computerized civilization, encryption is the fundamental building block of liberty. I think that is clear. Very interesting philosophically as to why that is so. So I then instead thought, well, I should really tackle trying to decrypt physical reality. That sounds mad, but that's what physicists do, right? We try and decrypt physical reality to understand time and space, the beginning and end of things. And after a while, I felt I had, although physics is very wide, but I felt I had a decent enough understanding that the extra time put in wouldn't produce a great deal more understanding. And so then I came back taking some of these concepts that have been developed in quantum mechanics about understanding flows of causality, how one thing causes another. And if you look at it to a particular interpretation through the flow of information, with how information from one thing that you're trying to measure goes on to cascade causality across others, and then eventually to the person looking at it. And so I thought why not take that concept, which can perhaps be described in the way that WikiLeaks uses it as causality amplification. Some small amount of capital leading to a larger amount of information, leading to a cascade of effect. And try and put that into place to help understand human civilization. And while that's in some sense a very ambitious and impossible project, along the way to have some fun and achieve some important blows for justice, which is satisfying when you're doing it. It's very, very, very satisfying to see innocent people, for example, walk out of prison with one of our publications above their head, the key document used.
Decrypting human civilization. There's a whole lot there. There's a whole lot there. The brother's deep. I'm not picking up on all of it, but I'll tell you what I picked up on. So decrypting human civilization, the problems that we have, everything's been encrypted. You have privacy. And that's the whole purpose of encryption, is privacy. I'm not for privacy. I'm for your privacy. I'm for your family's privacy. But does the state need privacy? Does a state that works for you need privacy? Does a state that works for the people need privacy from the people? No, it does not. It's certainly not America. Certainly not Britain. Certainly not Israel. Certainly not the superpowers of the world that can end all human civilization. So obviously the encryption's not for you. It's against you. It's so you can't decrypt what's going on. But then he's talking at another level. It even went into the physics and the quantum physics of it. how everything's connected around the world, the internet, WikiLeaks, information that's available, controlling the human race. An interesting experiment to see what happens when you allow more information to get out and you allow people to see that they're being played against each other. Allow people to see that their state's always lying to them. Allow them to see that their state is murdering and torturing and doing some of the most evil things ever that maybe your morals don't agree with. Perhaps that your intellect doesn't want to engage in. Perhaps that your ethics says you have no part of. The experiment that is WikiLeaks, the experiment that is opening up to the human race, like to all microbiology, the access to a neural network within its species. Very bold.
Back in 2007, when I launched WikiLeaks, I don't know if people can bring their minds back to the cultural dynamics on the internet at that time. It was, in some sense, far more controlling space than it is now. In other senses, far more open, because there weren't, the big players didn't dominate it as much as they do now. But the fight as to whether a WikiLeaks was culturally acceptable hadn't been had yet. And through succeeding in that fight and defending the organization, we became, in a very unusual way, part of the status quo. Not of the status quo of establishments, obviously. Many establishments are opposed to us because we publish secrets, and all establishments are in some sense hypocritical and rely on keeping a different interior world to an exterior presentation. But WikiLeaks became a culturally established, such that there would be a tremor sent through the broader internet culture, which is now the broader Western culture, if WikiLeaks were to disappear. And that's a very difficult role to be in. What would it mean? It would mean that essentially the envelope for publishers and freedom of speech and the rights of citizens versus institutions and establishments would suddenly contract. So I personally and WikiLeaks are partly in the business of keeping the envelope wide, being that avant-garde where we're constantly crashing up against icebergs, constantly, trying to smash through the ice, or at the very least maintain position, so that behind us there is a widened cultural space for liberty, broadly speaking.
Anti-establishment. Once again, is your establishment for you if it's for secrets? As kids, we used to talk about fighting the power. Do you want to fight the power, or are you a part of the power? Raging against the machine. Do you rage against the machine? Are you a cog, a screw, a nut job driving the machine? Litmus test. Somebody standing up to the establishment is either a hero or a traitor. And the litmus test for whether or not you're a sellout has to do a lot with whether you are pro-establishment, pro-power, or anti-power and anti-establishment. What are the biggest threats to business and government?
You've had some very good speakers that are speaking at the kind of practical, everyday computer security industry. So I'm not going to do that, probably because I wouldn't be that good at it. The WikiLeaks has a threat model, but it's a very high threat model. Absurd, in fact. I mean, the UK government, by the middle of 2015, admitted just one department alone had spent £12.6 million. It was very embarrassing on surveilling me. It was very embarrassing, and so in response, they classified the budget. So the budget figures have not been released. They certainly haven't been released for others. So that's a high threat level environment. It's very interesting, I suppose, all the the means that we've come up with to deal with that environment. But they are, in some sense, unique to a small to mid-sized organization operating at the highest levels, of which I'm not sure that there are any others than us. I suppose that there are some independence groups and terrorist organizations, but at least on the terror side, obviously it's quite a different game to the one that we're engaged in. Okay, but there is a much bigger threat to everyone, and I see it like this. Some of you, well, at the time of the Los Alamos project, physics, Western physics, became harmonized because you brought the different physics traditions from across Europe, the leading figures, to the United States and to Los Alamos, and then you had a harmonization of nomenclature and understanding, and those people then spread out. So one of those people was Enrico Fermi, an Italian physicist, very interesting man. One night, Enrico Fermi was out walking in Los Alamos with some of his physicist buddies, and he looked up at the stars and said, "Where is everyone?" And so you're going to freak out a little bit because, yes, I'm bringing in the aliens into this part of the talk to answer this question. His question is very deep. It's that there don't appear to be any. And by appear, I mean there are no physical signs that we can detect in terms of what happens to stars. The energy seems to be constantly boiling off, being wasted into space. We don't hear radio signals. We don't see anything of civilized life. And yet, in the last 10 years, we see in the last 10 years, the astrophysics of planetary astrophysics has shown that there's tens of thousands of extrasolar planets that we have actually detected on an individual basis. And from that, you can assemble the probabilities of there being Earth approximating planets. And there's hundreds of millions, maybe billions, just in this galaxy. So the question then becomes, well, where is the civilized life? Why don't we see it? Why don't we see any signs of it anywhere? And so the answers to that are, well, it could be the reasons we don't see signs of civilized life with our increasingly powerful measurement apparatus is because life simply doesn't evolve, life itself. That's why we don't see civilized life. There's something very rare about the Earth that means that life here evolved. But when we look at the Earth and when we look at extrasolar planets, we don't see any reason why that should be true. In fact, we see organic amino acids in space dust and asteroids and so on. And we know that asteroids cross-pollinate. For example, there's asteroids here from Mars, bits of Earth has gone to Mars, etc. when we get hit by an asteroid and stuff flies off, etc. So there's quite a lot of reason to believe that the basic building blocks of life have spread widely. So my view, and I think it's the only view you can take so far until more data comes in, is that there's something very unstable about civilization. There's something very unstable about technologically advanced civilization that means it doesn't go on for long. And I think the answer to that is the very rapid competition, if you like, the light speed competition that occurs when you wire up the world to itself. And that very rapid competition can have two fates. And number one, it can produce very robust artificial intelligences that are then coupled with their states. You can see that panning out in the United States and China as they each shore up. They're going to take, those two forces are going to take essentially all the market. And the rapid competition between them with the backing and support of the states behind them, and the exacerbation of the commercial competition, through geopolitical competition, will lead to an uncontrollable desire for growth in artificial intelligence capacity. Leading to very severe conflict or stultification. There's interesting, you can follow these trajectories in different ways. It takes too long to describe.
Pause there for a minute, because I'm going to kind of explain it a certain way, right? Keep in mind when you listen to the brother that this brother's been buried in an embassy, talking to himself in the wall, far from his family and friends, because he tried to bring us a message of truth. He tried to bring the human race truth. And so he's a little dealing with stuff, right? They're psychologically messing with him. What is he explaining? Technological advancement, civilizations, there's something unstable about them. Why? Well, because when you have people on a planet and they're evolving technologically far beyond all the other species, they stop fitting in with Gaia. They stop fitting in with the balance of ecosystems. They start developing technology. They start tribing up by group and location and religion and ignorance and color and all the different things. And so they're all competing for resources on a planet that has limited resources. They're all competing for technology, better and better batleth, better and better catapults, better and better Greek fire, bigger and bigger airplanes, stronger tanks, bigger bombs, napalm that burns up more human beings, atomic bombs that can blow up cities, nuclear bombs that can blow up the world. And so this gets into Michio Kaku's theory. Actually, I think it was Carl Sagan's theory about why you don't see aliens everywhere. And maybe it's because of most civilizations destroy themselves. Most civilizations can never get out of that tribal, psychological, epigenetic gene, warrior gene mind screw of fighting somebody else and tribing up. That reptilian brain, that we're controlled by the monkey brain, but the violent reptilian brain continues to encourage us to fight with other people. And so there's something unstable about a technologically advancing civilization with an exploding population on a planet of limited resources. We end up murdering ourselves. And this is why I like one of the things that Michio Kaku talks about is that if we ever actually get into space, they ever tell us the truth about space because they're already up there. If they ever take us into space with them, they ever reveal the truth about what they're doing up there, that we'll see planet after planet of destroyed civilizations. Why? Because every civilization we've ever had on this planet went extinct. So if it happened here, it'll happen there. Just as you compete technologically advancing for resources on one continent, so you will on a planet. So the vast majority of planets go extinct if they can't figure out that they get to survive if they work together. They die if they continue to be subhuman, subspecies. That's what he's trying to explain.
So I think that's our biggest threat. It is geopolitical competition, removing what otherwise might be sensible human controls on the development of artificial intelligence. That geopolitical competition harnessed by and itself harnessing the largest artificial intelligence companies to ratchet up a process which human beings can no longer control. Not in the sense of there being killer robots, although of course Google is now putting its AI in drones and so on, so yeah, there are killer robots. Not in...
I'm gonna walk over that too quick. Google putting their AI in drones. Not if AI exists, but Google already putting AI in their drones, right? And that's why a lot of the CEOs walked away from Google, if you guys remember that. They quit their jobs and they walked off. They left jobs paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, just walked away. They didn't have to wait for a federal government shutdown, and they didn't cry about it neither. They walked away. Why? Because they were working for an unethical corporation doing unethical things on a planet that's technologically unstable, locked into conflict. This is why you shouldn't be working for the federal government.
In this classic dystopian sense, but rather in a way that comes from understanding how human institutions behave. which is institutions that are built on competition and growing their size and dominating markets, etc., take any advantage they get and will continue to ratchet up in competition. And everything that they produce has that DNA in it. And that's where we're headed. And that's a severe threat to human beings in general and all businesses. But
pause. What does he mean that we encode our DNA in it and in our institutions? This is what I talk about when I talk about colonization and conflict models and survival of the fittest and monetary systems and cronyism. We take our need to dominate and we make it highly successful in corporations. We take our complete indifference and apathy and survival of the fittest capitalist crony models and crony socialism, letting the weakest die, letting birth determine who lives and dies. And we breed that DNA into corporations. And this is what's wrong as a great example with the pharmaceutical industry. Not that they're bad, but we encode competition in the DNA of the organization. And growth after growth, the bigger they get, the stronger they get, the more money they get, the less human life can actually matter. The more and more the bottom line is everything. And so you end up with a pharmaceutical industry that started off a bunch of shaman and healers, natural medicines, with chemical companies where went from 100% of the medications used to be for healing human body to less than 20%. And the other 80% is so chemically toxic, it has all types of side effects, which is why I'm drinking my smoothie, by the way. Y'all got your smoothie? I'm done. This is the last go. There you go. For the people who they doubted it, like, oh, he doesn't drink that whole smoothie I drink the whole smoothie. All right, finish up. But that's the point, is you install your DNA of conflict into corporations. Now, you don't go from small corporations and medium corporations to large corporations to monopolies without bringing in a sense of extreme harm if that model is the same model we utilize in killing each other and stealing what they have in colonization and tribal conflict. So you create the same tribal conflict that we have that made sure America doesn't have a government. It's the same tribal conflict you have between massive pharmaceutical companies. To get bigger and better, you got to make more medications and more money just to compete. And so they're not actually the bad guy. We just encoded them with our conflict DNA that puts human life in low priority.
Perhaps the answer to that threat is people understand computer security, offensive computer security in particular, trying to work out what to do about it. The nation states haven't been around that long. Most people don't understand that the Westphalian system has only been around for about 400 years. And in fact, most nations, not states, but nations, communities of people, were not even in the Westphalian system for a long time. Now, you can think about why the Westphalian system, why the nation-state system developed. I think it's essentially the technology, including speed of transport, letters, radio communications, etc., meant that each center of organization attracted smaller groups of organization to it, and they grew and grew and grew and kept growing until they hit the boundaries of others also doing the same. And then there was conflict, and then borders were constructed either to, well, unless they were natural borders arose as a result of trying to dampen down the expense of that conflict. Okay, and there's clear physical reasons why that arose. It's a geographical conflict, and geographical basically means two-dimensional spatial conflict. But the internet has no two-dimensional spatial nature. So instead, what you see with the conflicts that occur through internet-based organizations, and states are increasingly moving onto the internet, is a kind of interdigitization of conflict. That is, there's no border. And it's 220 milliseconds from New York to Nairobi. So why would there ever be peace in such a scenario? There's no border of peace within which there's greater cooperation. That's not easy to construct. Now, with cryptography, to the degree that it's well engineered, you can
The sound messed up. There we go. Dang it. I didn't know what I was saying. Y'all messing. I pressed the button. I'm sorry. But the borders don't exist. I got the YouTube comments working. Digitally, they don't exist. The only borders are technological advancement in bandwidth. No sound, still no sound, still no sound, no sound, out of sound. You lost sound. Everybody saying no sound is back. There's still no sound back. I'm back. Okay, there we go. So the only borders are digital. The only borders are corporations, right? They're technological advancement. They're treaties between each other, business to business. This is what I'm talking about in that nations don't exist. I keep saying this to people and they think I'm nutty, and I'm not. I'm telling you, nations don't exist. Because when you have corporations that get so large that they can buy politicians around the robber baron time, then they can buy entire political parties, then they can buy entire military industrial complexes, they can buy entire nations, they can kill presidents, they can kill civil rights leaders. They become so big that they own multiple interests in multiple nations. They can drive Russia and America into a conflict if it makes sense. They can get America to invade Venezuela because they want to grow some banana plants. They can topple governments. Anything you can do to keep the humans in conflict is a benefit. Them believing in fantasy walls, them believing in fantasy nations, them believing in fantasy races and fantasy religions, anything to maximize your DNA's ability for conflict. The DNA we encode in corporations to buy people.
can create some kinds of borders. In fact, that's what all institutions that are surviving on the internet and anarchic international space are doing. They're creating their own borders using cryptography. But the size of the attack surface for any decent sized organization and the number of people and different types of software and hardware that it has to pull inside itself means that that's very, very hard to establish. And things are moving so fast that I don't think it's really possible for organizations to come up with borders that are predictable enough and stable enough to eliminate conflict. Therefore, there will be more conflict. They're kind of, they're sexy because they have a lot of power and that they conform to certain classical human models that we've culturally absorbed over the last at least few hundred years, and the notion of a well-defined cultural other. But I think they're small players, really small players in this game as it goes forward. I mean, you look at what Google and Baidu and Tencent and Amazon, Facebook are doing. in their basically mass open cut harvesting of the knowledge of humankind as we express it when we communicate with each other, if some people do on Facebook, or uploaded YouTube videos, or deals between different companies to get hold of their data. That classical model, which people in academia have called surveillance capitalism, namely you acquire capital through surveillance. The capital is the data, and then you sell it to advertisers, basically. That's changed now. It's really a very, very interesting and important and severe economic change, which is to take the surveillance capitalism model and transform it instead into a model that doesn't yet have a name, but we call it the AI model, which is to use bait and switch techniques that Google and others have done to provide enticing services to get hold of data, and then using that vast reservoir, train artificial intelligences of different kinds, and thereby replacing not just intermediating sectors, which things, most things you do on the internet are, in some sense, more efficient intermediations, but to actually take over the transport sector, or to create whole new sectors. And even just the transport sector alone, this is worth trillions of dollars more than the advertising intermediation sector. So it's and to be a player in that game, you have to have the vast reservoirs of data. And Europe doesn't even have one. It's incredible. It could have perhaps could have struggled forth with one. But of course, the AI companies in the UK have mainly been bought out by US companies. And similarly with Germany, I don't know whether China has been buying out European companies. But
So I'm gonna stop for a minute. So Karen, what you're talking about is the Telecommunications Act. So now we really know what it's about, right? The only borders were the fact that you had all these telecommunication companies that were divided. They were separated. They were all in competition. And so you had to break up the ability for massive monopolies to buy them all up to make it easier. Why? Because bandwidth was the limitation. They got that out of the way. Corporations are just monsters. They want to get bigger and bigger and bigger. If they got to deal with 100 different telecommunication companies, it's more of a challenge than dealing with 2. And so you go from massive amounts of telecommunications companies to just a few. So this gets back to Clinton. This is why I say it doesn't really matter who's president, because all of this is still marching full ahead, full steam. If you had, how hard it would be if we had to roll out 5G and you only had, or you had thousands of telecommunication companies, it would be quite difficult. Now you only got, 8 mainstream large media companies that own all of that. It's quite easy now. It's all for the same purpose, that we have psychopathic genes to collect energy, and we've taken that DNA and put it into corporations and models that are doing the same things that we do. So the same apathetic way we can kill for profit, so will a corporation. And this is the world that we're coming into. This is part of why some of my ingredients for fixing the world outside of no secrecy is no corporations, or certainly no big ones. None that are big enough to buy governments and dominate entire continents of people. But that's what the Telecommunication Act was about. Outside of the fact that nanorobots and getting automated robots to swarm and controlling servos from a distant and nano dust and smart dust.
But if you look at things like the European privacy legislation and the tradition of privacy, not so much from UK, but emanating from Germany and Germanic Europe culturally, that while it's kind of dear to me as someone who understands about the importance of privacy, It has meant that a European company has not been able to emerge, although I think there's other reasons as well why it hasn't, that could harness all the data of Europe, pull it together, and use that to train artificial intelligences in the way Chinese and American companies have. And it's an interesting question. I think it's, you know, the answer is not terribly interesting and a bit obvious, which is vast databases of IDs are economically interesting to institutions for other reasons. And the centralization of those vast databases that then makes the marginal cost of stealing each ID lower, and the globalization of principally commerce means that you can use IDs in more places. But let's kind of pull back and look at it at a more philosophical perspective. I say that this generation, well, that perhaps our generation, but anyway, this generation being born now, in seconds in most countries, very shortly in most countries, and it's already happened in say, China, most European countries, the United States, is the last free generation. You're born, and either immediately or within, say, a year, you're known globally. Your identity in one form or another, coming as a result of your idiotic parents plastering your name and photos over Facebook, or as a result of insurance applications or passport applications, transport on airlines, etc. You are known to all the world's major powers, all the world's major state powers, and all the world's major commercial powers. That's a very different situation for individuals to be in than they have previously been in.
Ever.
A small child now, in some sense, has to negotiate its relationship with all the world's major powers. Of course, in practice, it can't do anything.
Commodity.
Its parents are not managing that negotiation. But it puts us in I think, a very different position in the sense that very few, in fact, maybe only a few people in this audience, very technically capable people, are able to able to live apart, to choose to live apart, to choose to go their own way. They must be part of not only the state, but the major state-like corporations, so powerful they may as well be states, and not just their own state, but other states as well. That's a significant change, cultural change for humanity. It smells a little. It smells a bit like totalitarianism in some way. Obviously, the world is different, but there's some feeling about it which is totalitarian. And so what is the answer for nearly everyone? That is an inescapable conclusion. So is the answer that we all have to be part of the state? We all have to be part of managing the ongoing evolution of our cultural, national, commercial, international structures, because we can't escape from it.
Because we can't escape from it, and we walk our children into it. We give them their labels. Ellen said, "Here's your sign, stupid." Welcome to the world. You have no rights to water. You have no rights to land. You have no rights to food. You have no rights to anything unless you go to school, get an education, unless you luck up and born in a family with the resources to care for you. You're born a slave. And generation after generation, we're passing it on. But we are coming to some sort of a precipice that we need to pay attention to. And that is AI, which is what he keeps going back to. We keep handing our problems, our psychopathic evolved need to survive and kill to do it, to the next generation over and over and over and over until it's the last generation. What is your view on media coverage of your activities?
You know, journalists have one of the lowest approval ratings of all professions. I think the last study in the United States was about 25%. I think lawyers are just slightly lower. Congressmen are way lower. And just about everyone else is higher. Why is that? Well, it's a sad thing. It's a really sad thing. As someone who loves to document how human civilization actually works, we're in constant warfare with those people who are trying to distort the understanding of how human beings actually behave, including distortions by proxy, which is to you know, come up with nonsense about WikiLeaks or me. I mean, there's been a lot of there's a lot of amazing plots that we've uncovered, in one form or another. I think my the favorite allegation is that I'm a cat torturer. No, seriously, AFP, Agence France Presse, put that everywhere, and even into the New York Times. So there's I don't really know where to start for people who aren't familiar with this kind of disgusting machine that the media is and how it works. Perhaps it's enough to say that most human wars have come about as a result of lies. And that seems absolutely clear in democracies, that democracies have to be lied into war.
All of them.
It's a very serious ongoing problem. It has resulted in the deaths of millions of people in the last 50 years. And you can do a calculation. How many deaths is each journalist responsible for? And I did it in the United States because, not meaning to pick on it, but there's figures for the total number of political journalists. It's about 5,000. It's something like 200 kills per journalist in the last 20 years, just the US journalists alone, because they would not do their job, they would not be accurate, and because they lacked courage.
Does that sound like fake news to you? Does that sound like the truth? Think about that. How many journalists, from John Pilger to Julian Assange to Chris Hedges to that ABC executive that have come forward as whistleblowers and said that they were only allowed to report on certain articles, that they go away to the field. This is one of the reasons why Chris Hedges left, that he would go to the field and he'd come back. He'd have his report and they would modify it. They would take certain pictures out. You know, how often do we hear this in Vietnam, right? So they always modify what you get to keep it going, right? Media turned on Assange the same way they turned on Martin Luther King. Not because they got anything against Assange, not because they got anything against Martin Luther King or JFK or 9/11. It's because of money. Money gets us to turn on each other, professional, racial, religious, nation. It's that in our DNA, that need to survive, that need to be the best, understanding that on survival of the fittest, if you're not fit, you die. And so they turn on it. It was interesting to think about how low approval ratings the journalists get, and yet people still watch. Why is that? And that is the truth, George. War is jacked up. It's jacked up. It's evil. It's murder. It's a violent decision-making process that should no longer exist, right? Because that's what it's based in. It's based in this idea that I don't have to talk to you, so I'll just kill you and I'll take what I want or I'll get my way. And we don't do that at work, right? We work with people we don't like. We work where we got to make hard decisions. And if we can evolve to work with people we don't like in environments we don't like, doing jobs we don't like, and we can negotiate our way and make these corporations successful, of course politicians can do it without violence and war. Of course they can write laws without forcing you into prison cells and taking your rights. But we haven't decided to force sentience in government yet. We haven't decided to force sentience in our models. That's why I think this is an important conversation. And it's not a United States conversation. It's a world conversation. We just watched this morning grown men beating up kids. We watched this morning a 2-year-old putting her hands up when she got out the car because the police pulled up. We're building a world that's based in psychopathic violence as opposed to negotiation and intellectuality solving problems. Does he have any regrets for releasing sensitive information?
No, this is another one of these
that could have endangered lives, as if the wars weren't taking them.
propaganda talking points. Not to criticize you, I know you're trying to give me something to bounce off. But the United States government had to admit under oath in the trial of Chelsea Manning in 2013 that it could not find a single instance of someone who had been physically harmed as a result of our publications to that point.
Outside of that, I got to defend the little brother. I got to defend the brother a little more there. Outside of that fact that nobody was hurt from him releasing the information, he released the information to stop the hurt. He released the information to bring groups together. He released the information to educate the populace and stop death and murder. He told the truth to do those things. He released the truth. We went in the war to murder people and steal from them, to colonize and globalize. There's a difference, not only in intent, but killed 5 million people since 9/11. So it's not even a topic, not even a discussion point. Trying to do the right thing versus knowing it's wrong and lying to do it.
Now, I should say that if you work on an industrial scale, everyone knows you work on industrial scale, then the world is big. And there's a lot of reverberating dynamics that you can never properly play out. It's the same for car manufacturers, it's the same for big publishers. But thus far, there's no example of that happening for us.
When you eventually leave the embassy, do you plan on continuing your activities?
I don't know. No, I mean, I do know, but I don't know what I should answer in response to that question. It's a interesting diplomatic back and forth about, well, really about in my view, the alliance structure, the Western alliance structure between the United Kingdom and the United States. That's caused problems for many people in the UK for a long time with injustice in relation to extradition cases. And quite a bit of prestige as well, quite a bit of state pride involved. States never liked to be forced to follow their own rules. In fact, they define themselves in significant degree as having power by violating their own rules. That's one of the key ways in which states demonstrate the supremacy of their power, is that they're the one group that doesn't have to obey its own rules. And that's true in my situation.
And on that, he's too kind. He's too kind. And he's also giving a false sense of hope. He's not getting out. And when he gets out, he's going straight to Langley, Virginia. You'll never see Assange again. Because we turned on him. We sold him out. We believed so much in our little bigotries and our nationalism and that he was this traitor that we turned on him. We watched the Kardashians. Right? This man gave up his life. He gave up a life with his children, a life with his family. He gave it all up. And we turned on him. This is why I try to talk about Assange when I can. This is why I'm doing this video, which is why I appreciate if you share it. It's not the most refined video, but it's the point of not letting the message die. Unfortunately, the media cycle here is too short. and people tend to forget unless you keep reposting. He's gave up his life to help the human race. Not unlike a Martin Luther King or a JFK or someone else who gives up their life to tell the truth. Not unlike all the whistleblowers in NASA, the whistleblowers in the FBI, the whistleblowers in the CIA, all the ones that come forward to say your world is going to come to an end if you don't restrain your government. And yet you have people still playing government, people still playing these games that are completely insignificant, still picking 2020s, and they don't have 2020 vision of the world. That's what this is about. It's about listening to a man that has insight that none of us have, insight that not even the top of our governments have, because he's gotten all these documents from various sources and he's putting them together. How do you see things changing in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of the types of cyber threats?
In the 10-year period is hard to predict, and that's the big problem. I don't see the National Security Agency, GCHQ, Five Eyes Alliance more broadly, France a bit, Russia a bit, China mostly domestically, have been engaged in mass surveillance, and the Five Eyes countries for, well, serious computational mass surveillance about 20 years. That's something that is of such scale that it strategically affects the development of human civilization. In fact, it's called strategic interception for exactly that reason. Now, strategic interception is slowly being degraded, and that was a very important thing to do because, and I guess some people can't see the reasons, but as the majority of the world's populations threw itself onto the internet, we merged our human societies with the internet. So the result is that whatever the security structure of the internet, our human societies also became part of that. And that structure was, in part, mass strategic interception. Now, I worked on this for years, many other people as well, and we had a really big hit in 2013 with Edward Snowden revelations that smashed that into the consciousness, not of the average person. I think that was a negative, actually, because they all became paranoid about what they were saying and became fearful and conformist. But we smashed that into the minds of engineers, and engineers thereby felt ennobled, and that they were part of the flow of human destiny by including encryption into the communications protocols. So that has checked a very dangerous development, and we're left then with the other dangerous developments, of which the important ones are the ones that I described. I don't think that now, and perhaps in the next 3 years, we're going to see computer hacking at scale. People talk about it as if it's happening at scale at the moment. It's not happening at scale, not compared to strategic interception. But the AIification of computer hacking is something that will happen at scale because you're automating it. Now, within AI, how you train AIs for discrete problems, and computer hacking, many aspects of it is a discrete problem. There hasn't been significant progress on, in my view. What there has been enormous progress on is how you kind of map through a space which is in between a fluid problem and a discrete problem. And so an example of a space like that is the game of Go. That's a very good example toy space, where each step in Go is discrete, but you've got enough pieces and enough board that it almost starts to become a fluid. And when you assemble all the computer hacking techniques together, there's so many and so many targets that now you're starting to look like, now you have a search space that starts to look more like a fluid. And these search spaces we can increasingly conquer. And when you have very large computer programs, and I suppose when you fuzz large computer programs, if they're large enough, you have enough discrete chinks in the attack surface that altogether they're more like a fluid. So I think inevitably we're going to see this AIification of computer hacking attacks, and that.
All right, I had to stop. All right, I'm sorry. I was geeking out. This is the problem. You geek out. This is my field, and so I'm going back and I'm like digging it. This is delicious to me, and I forget that, you know, sometimes this if it's outside of your realm, you're not processing. All right, so simplification. He's talking about how AI is going to be used for hacking, or it already is, right? And these could be some of the things that Elon Musk saw, right? So in terms of Skynet, right? Like think about how dangerous the world is now with hacking. Think about how dangerous the world is now, where you can't click a link in Facebook. You can't open an email and click on anything. You're constantly being hacked into. Your phone rings, you pick up the phone and you're talking to a computer, and you don't know you're talking to a computer, or a scammer, and they're trying to scam you and get you to give your credit card or your bank information. Or imagine a world where AI is the hacker. Imagine the world where the hacker doesn't have to eat Hot Pockets and go to school the next day. The Hot Pocket, you know, didn't running out chasing girls at the bar, getting drunk and taking breaks. The hacker works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's learning software. It's AI. It's going into your bank account. It's getting your bank account numbers. It's tapping into voice recognition. It's calling you on the phone. It's acting like it's the bank calling you. It's giving you information it shouldn't have to get your credit card information, or it's hacking into that. Imagine a world where all the cars are smart driving cars. One hacker with a great piece of AI software in a Internet of Things world, a smart city where everything's connected, can shut off every refrigerator. They can turn on every microwave oven. They can hold an entire city hostage, one person with some really great AI. And this is the dangerous world that we're going into. And this is why I'm saying it's not just human labor that's going extinct. To a degree, it's human thought and human control, giving up all control. God forbid smart desks actually be a thing, and nanorobots actually be a thing, and swarming robots that can kill people, and robotic armies, and these automated ships they say the Navy has actually are a thing. So what he's talking about is software actually taking over and doing the hacking. So you don't have to be worried about a few little people doing it, but you got to worry about fleets of server and thousands of replicating software taking over a world that we just gaslitly completely automated, and we connected everything and we rolled out 5G to control everything. Imagine one person, Lex Luthor, could actually hold an entire nation hostage. This is why it's smart not to do these things, not in the secrecy, but in the public domain. You want everybody to be able to see what we're doing, what we're up to, how to access it, make sure it's open source, so you have hundreds of thousands of software engineers that can derail it and pause it and critically think about it in think tanks, making sure that this is something that doesn't enslave the next human race, right? So I'm all for automation and I'm all for software and I love it, it's my field. But the problem is there's responsible use of technology and there's extremely highly dangerous use of technology. If I were a billionaire, I'd be like Elon Musk. Just from the few little bits and pieces I saw, I'd be trying to live in a tin can on Mars, because the evil that we're tempting with, it truly is demonic, and no one can even process the levels of the danger we're walking into. You're worried about AI killer robots, and you need to be worried about the robots that take over the driving cars and the pizza delivery. You need to think about the robots that take over the nano robots. Those are the significant ones, the robots that can take over the airplanes and crash planes and hold an entire world hostage.
Will then be merged with other search spaces. And those other search spaces look like, well, what is the informational space? Because in the end, what you really want is machines and human beings to make particular decisions. So you bring to bear, you acquire as much knowledge as possible, and then map it back in onto the actors whose decisions you want to affect. And so there's a lot of talk about hybrid warfare, some of it legitimate, some of it overblown. It's actually been something that's been around for many, many years. But I think this notion of bringing together different search spaces in AI that are large enough to have a semi-fluid property means that you can then go through the search spaces of all of them together. And that can produce something very powerful and, from a human perspective, completely incomprehensible.
Incomprehensible. That's the problem. So we're tempting the demon on levels we don't even understand. Things are going so quickly. Is what I talk about when I mention that, you know, we're not really making an AI because we don't know what the I is. We are actually making mental illness in an automated learning fashion and releasing it on the world. But it's not our government's fault. It's not our corporation's fault. It's our fault, right? We're the ones who give the consent. We're the ones who are keeping it going. We're the ones that, without 2020 sight, are trying to elect a 2020. We're the ones who aren't paying attention to everything, but we're deciding for everyone. It's on us. Is there a point in which you may decide to walk out of the embassy and see what happens? I'll go on to that. And this isn't new. This is his last talk. This was the fall of last year. I'm just replaying it again because it's not being played, and I think it's important. He's still talking about things that are hundreds of times important, far beyond what you'll ever see on television and the news, far beyond what's important, what any of your politicians are talking about. They're talking about survival of their political parties and their little crap. He's talking about survival of the human race and the dumb things we're doing that are going to extinct the entire planet. So I'm playing it again. If you want to comment, you're going to have to go to YouTube. Facebook doesn't seem to like this, so they're not. I've played with it a few times. They're not going to let any comments. There's some sort of shadow banning or issue or something going on, but you can comment on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, I guess human beings are very adaptable. It's their best quality and their worst quality. They adapt to doing nasty things. They adapt to being on the receiving end of injustice, and they cease complaining about it. The real question is when, not whether, but when the UK government will follow its treaties that it has signed up to. If we look in my particular situation, okay, yes, everyone understands there's a vast political and geopolitical dynamic that's intimately connected with the United States, but it is instrumentalized in practice by UK intelligence services and police, who will physically arrest me and hold me for whatever the US wants to do with me. So, but what is the excuse to actually do that, to enable those budget spends? The excuse is, in a case that I was never charged for, where the extradition warrant has already been dropped, where I repeatedly won, they say that they're going to keep around the warrant, the UK end of the warrant, for the Swedish extradition, which I won. They're going to keep around that warrant despite me winning that, because I came in here, and perhaps they might want to, they haven't, but perhaps they might want to charge me with a bail violation. This is the technical excuse. They haven't. Twice the UK courts have refused to do so. Why? Well, because if you move your house arrest location to pursue a parallel legal process, a higher legal process, which is an asylum application, that's not a bail violation. Okay, but what if it was? What if you disagree with that analysis and you say that is a bail violation? Well, okay, even before I came into this embassy and applied for asylum, which is everyone's right, everyone in this audience, if you are genuinely being persecuted, even before I came in this embassy, if you add up the time in prison under a very grueling house arrest for 18 months, I've already done 3 times the maximum amount of time under UK sentencing legislation. The UK sentencing legislation values house arrest at 50% of prison time. That's the law. So there's, not only is this a bogus warrant that it has no purpose, if you, as the judge did a couple of weeks ago, they say, well, maybe if he came to court, I might want to charge him. So that's why I need to keep that warrant around. Okay, but if that occurred, there could be no possible prison time because I've already served more than 3 times the maximum possible prison time, even before I was awarded asylum. If you include the time in the embassy, which you should, because the UN has assessed it and said, if you legally block someone from leaving the country, that's a form of detention. That would be 10 times the amount. So the real question is, when is the UK government going to uphold the treaty obligations that it has signed and uphold basic justice principles within UK law?
When they're forced to by their people, they're not being forced to by their people. And that's the problem we have, is that he's locked in and no, he can't walk out. He can't walk out, not because the governments are evil, because we keep supporting them to stay the way they are. That's the problem. The problem isn't the government. Government's going to get away with everything it can, right? It's an energy consumer like we are. It's an energy consumer like corporations are. We are the ones who did this, and we are the ones who maintain it. He can't walk out is because we're not forcing integrity in government. We've become used to pain, like how he put it. I can't put it the way he did. But over a while, we adapt to pain. We adapt to being gaslit. We adapt to being lied to. After a while, it's normal for politicians to lie. It's okay for politicians to lie. It's okay for a politician to lie because they're my race. It's okay for a politician to lie because they're my party. It's okay for a politician to lie because they're in my country. And after a while, justice has no meaning at all. And that's why he's there. He's there because he committed the highest crime on earth. He told the truth to the slaves. The highest crime on the human farming experiment. He actually told the truth across all lines to all the slaves of data he got from information released to WikiLeaks. That's the greatest treason in the land. To highlight to people that they're all being played and breaking all that down. They're gonna kill him. There's nothing else. He will spend the rest of his life in prison, or they'll kill him, or they'll inject him with something where he won't be able to function. But there's no way he's getting out. He's done. He's done. The only way he gets out is if the world stood up in a yellow vest protest, which just isn't gonna happen. But he's there because of us. Governments are meeting with private sector companies to showcase their, I can't read the rest of that, cyber capabilities in secret. Is there something that should worry the public? Everything?
We've published a series called the Spy Files that documented these conferences, private government conferences, where the different mass surveillance vendors and targeted hacking vendors like Gamma Group present their wares. And actually there's quite a lot to be gleaned from that. And whenever you're talking about a big, well, a sizable industrial sector, it's impossible to really hide its shadows now. You always see the shadow. You don't always see the thing, but you can see, you know, a little shadow of a foot sticking out somewhere. And through that, you can map out some of the contours. That is an indirect enough process and a conflict-free enough process that it is kind of hard to get the public really involved in it. We had done all that, for example, before the Edward Snowden publications. And the conflict in the Edward Snowden publications is what really drew people in, because it's not simply that WikiLeaks was saying it was important or Glenn Greenwald was saying it was important. It's that the President of the United States was saying it was important. Look, this is an outrageous situation. And so people went, oh, so power is concerned about this, therefore it in itself must be powerful. Yeah, I think it impinges on a deeper question, which is, the world is complex. How much of it do you need to know directly, and how much of it can you delegate? Now, I love the idea of intelligence agencies. I'm a fan of the idea of intelligence agencies because it has the word intelligence in it.
Yeah,
and I like that people know things. And maybe they might make sensible decisions if they know things. Intelligence agencies, when they're acting their best, reduce fear and reduce paranoia. Because if there's something that you don't know, hype merchants can fill this black box with the most terrifying possibility of what might be in there. Terrorism. But if you really do know another state's weapon systems and capacities, etc., it might reassure you that actually they're not as bad as the most catastrophic scenario. And so they can actually contribute towards peace in that way. The problem is, it's a principal-agent dilemma. So this is a classical problem when dealing, say, with lawyers, which is you hire a lawyer to work for you and represent you and act in your interest. But of course, the lawyer is also always trying to act in their own interest and inject their own interest into your equation. So how do you police that? How do you police it with lawyers? Well, you police it by constantly looking at their work and trying to do random samples, I guess, introspecting into their work to see if the claims made are justified. That is the fundamental problem with intelligence agencies, and it's the fundamental problem with delegation.
It's who watches the watchers. We have no one watching the watchers, and they're going to do what they're supposed to do. But it's a dual part thing, right? So I'm not saying it's really just us. We're the biggest share of it, but government has a responsibility too. Intelligence agencies have a responsibility. Snowden had one, he acted. Manning had one, he acted. Assange had one, he acted. I'm doing the best I can what I have, but whatever it is, you have to act on it. Whoever you are, whether you're in government or secret agencies or whatever it might be. Intelligence agencies are a good thing, and it makes perfectly good sense. But they're a tool like anything else. They can be used to oppress, or they can be used for terrorism, or they can be used to help people. They can be used to prevent riots in Charlottesville where people die. They can be used to prevent rape. They can be used to secure Honduras. They can be used to prevent all the things from the dark ages that we not only legalized, but we've normalized. Somebody was asking on Facebook about, well, you know, how to save them. We can save them. I had a plan. I got a plan, 40 grand, but I promise you they're watching, which is why it's not going to happen. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, all you need is 3,000 people with green hoodies. Distributing the hoodies to 3,000 people, show up in front of his embassy and give him one and walk him out. And there's a good chance you might actually get him out the embassy and in a subway and get him out of there. But it's not for long, right? Like, it's a pointless thing. It's a pointless thing because they'll catch him. And in fact, if anything, that's what they want you to do. They want you to try to rescue him because there's nowhere for him to go. The whole world is being monitored. They'll find him anywhere. There's nowhere he can go. In fact, it'll be funner that way because then they could legally kill him easily and get away with it. Oh, it was an accident. So it's not about getting him out. It's about looking at his example and waking up as many people as you can so that one day, if he is ever released, they're not just going to pull him right back in or just kill him. I mean, you're not just talking about government here. Like, government is just a tool. You're talking about industries and agencies, military industrial complexes. I mean, how much money did Raytheon lose because of him? How much money did Lockheed Martin lose because of him? How many wars were prevented or stopped because of him? The first Syria war, when Kerry tried to get everybody to agree to invade, was prevented. Who lost money on that deal? Who had $1 billion riding that they lost because it didn't come through because Americans stood up and called across lines, Democrats and Republicans, that said no war? So it's not just government that would kill them. It's not just it's security agencies. When you start saying truthful things and prioritizing human life over greed and profit, you make a lot of enemies. And in the world I grew up in, somebody would kill you for a $50 clock radio if they really needed a clock radio.
Of delegation of assessment about how the world is working. You can't completely delegate. You can't delegate because human beings inevitably are corrupt and cut corners and act in their own interests and not of the person who has appointed them. And in that case, for example, in the UK intelligence services, which have a role, an important role, every state needs something like an intelligence service to protect it from interference by other states. But without insight, deep insight into how those organizations are acting, they go astray. So intelligence agencies must be transparent. It's vital that they are transparent. And some of that, and because they are deeply interconnected with industry, some of that transparency is provided by enforcing transparency on the industry itself, including at these conferences.
Everything has to be transparent across the board. If you are responsible for human life, transparency. You have no reason for secrecy. If you can kill someone, transparency, no reason for secrecy. A lot of the reasons why people now see what's happening with the police, which I saw my entire life, was because they put body cameras on them. But the problem is they're the lowest person on the totem pole. If you are responsible for human life, you can't have any secrecy. You work for the human race. If you're in government, if you're in the intelligence agencies, if you work in a daycare, if you're a doctor, if you're a dentist, if you are providing a service in which people can die, military, you can't have any secrets. That's what a sentient species does. It doesn't chew off its own arm. It doesn't self-destruct itself. It looks out for itself. It has the ability to have empathy for its entire organism. Trapped by the voting system and the people who think it's part of being free. Yes, age of credilla, and that's the problem. Age of credilla, I probably keep saying it wrong, is that the voting system, people vote because that's what they think they're supposed to do. They can't connect in their head that voting is killing the earth, right? We've been voting, the earth is dying. We've been voting, more people are dying. We've been voting, the dark ages aren't going away. Obviously, because voting doesn't change anything. Obviously, because someone saw voting coming a long time ago and they've taken it over. Definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing, expect a different result. That's just where we are. That's why I embrace it, age. I'm like, I embrace it. I just like, you know what? Well, we all gonna die. At this record, at this route in the decision-making capability of most human beings at this point in time, the human race is on a train that's on fire, and we're heading for the gasoline depot, and we ain't got any brakes. And we're in the back, we're like, hey, somebody hit the brakes. You know, somebody, let's put out the fire. Hey, can somebody, you know, and it's just, they're full steam ahead. Vote, 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 vote. 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020. And that's the whole point of this part two of this last little video here, is that if you don't have 2020 vision and you don't see what's going on, then stop talking about electing a 2020. You're making decisions blind. Adrian is your name. I didn't know that. Okay, Adrian. Thank you. What do you believe is the best way of tracking privacy prevented by Internet of Things? IoT.
I mean, it's a big dilemma. One of our lawyers, who of course we will have to educate them about, you know, different counter surveillance techniques. But they said, God damn it, you know what we should do? We should like buy up some chunk of Madagascar or Patagonia or somewhere and just ban every electronic device from it. Like a radio wave electronic, well, high intensity radio wave, free area. because of that constant buffeting that we have by principally commercial organizations trying to harvest our interactions with the world. That's the that's the principal economic model that all these AI companies have had, and the traditional surveillance capitalism companies have had. And the number of degrees of interaction. So what do I mean by that? If you kind of imagine a space of interactions, the number of types of interaction, the frequencies of interaction between you and everything else in the space is dramatically increasing. And in a way, you can consider each one of these degrees of freedom is kind of like a triangulation. So to triangulate something in a two-dimensional space, well, okay, you just need two directions.
Pause for a minute, because again, I'm geeking out. Just to make sure everybody is on what he's saying, right? So controlling your interactions, right? When you lived in the world, like egalitarian society, you're just walking around. No one can control your interactions with a tree. No one can control your interactions with your lunch. No one can control those interactions with who you talk to walking around. But now the majority of people you talk to perhaps might be online. The majority of news you hear is on television, maybe online, social media. So everything goes back to the control of the human being, right? Because you collect more energy if you own more human beings, or you can control where they go, what they do. Somebody posted something. Who's it? Jules said it. I love what she just said. She said, according to Thoth, the first law given to man was to stop each other from eating each other. I took that as stop using and killing each other, right? And so it's eating each other metaphorically, right? Not that we weren't cannibals, hell yeah, we were. But after you could use a human being to grow food, then obviously it was more beneficial and profitable to control farming and control them farming. In walked slavery, right? So everything is about controlling human labor, and this applies to the same exact thing. If you can control the human beings' interactions, you control how they think. You control what they think. You control the outrage. A good example would be the mainstream media and the things that trigger people. They get this side upset because they only give them this much of the information. They get that side upset because they only get that much of the information. Emotions flare, and it's the end of the conversation. Doesn't really matter if you give them the truth later. They're already angry. Violence has occurred. Conflict has ensued. Tribal teams are already on this side and that side, and it's pointless. Nobody can hear the truth after that. And besides, we have a 24 media cycle, so it's over. This is how you can get people attacking a little kid because he has a Make America Great Again hat. Right? Because it's tribal. Controlling human interaction, points of freedom. And so what they're doing is, now that everything's so digital, is they're controlling your points of freedom. They're enslaving you to technology.
Two signals, directional signals. But we are giving off, if someone is using a mobile phone, for example, we're probably giving off a couple of hundred of these on average per second. Something like that. Maybe not quite as, maybe a dozen, perhaps. Although if you do video, of course, there's vast amounts more. So anyway, between dozens and hundreds of measurements, we are emanating constantly. And so if you collect those together, you can effectively triangulate someone's activities and behavior. And I don't think by chopping out many of them or adding kind of chaff, cover, that you can make that much of a difference. And increasingly it's less. And in terms of the Internet of Things, there's research prototypes now, which I assume are being used by intelligence agencies, of very small electronic circuits that you can just put in paper or put and paint or on the walls that are powered by the GSM stations, and they operate as the GSM radio wave passes through them. It gives them enough power for a very small amount of time to do things. obviously that tendency is going to continue. It's not like the Internet of Things. It's if you like,
Say it.
intelligent evil dust scattered everywhere.
I'm sorry, I was waiting for. I knew that part was coming. That's why we did the video this morning. We were talking about the news, and they were talking about the robots they're going to put in your veins to help you fight cancer. That is not the intent. Smart dust, right? The crazy people, all the crazy people talking about Morgellons disease, the crazy people who talked about chemtrails and nanoparticles and spraying all these things, these micro robots. I find it interesting. We're coming to the end of the interview, but this is around the part that they cut them off, right? So what do we got left? We got about 4 minutes, a little less than 4 minutes. Somebody at this point is picking up the phone. All right, you know what? That bastard didn't talk about the smart dust. You're going to have to shut that off. Okay, we're going to go down to the server downstairs in the embassy and go shut it off. When they start talking about the real stuff, like how it makes sense to me, they're rushing 5G. They're rushing 5G. They're admitting to you that they got to spray things out of airplanes to combat climate change. To me, that's not crazy. To me, everything is on a scale of plausibility, right? And I listen to people, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I don't know. Smart dust, that's pushing it. But then they come out and admit that they've been making these robots. AI is a thing. All the crazy things in time as they slowly start to release the data point, that plausibility scale should start going up in your mind. Linking it with human history and the control of human beings has always been what they've always been after. It's what the kings have always sought. The kings and lords, they never loved you. They don't love you now. They love themselves. They've always loved themselves. But somehow they convinced us they're rock stars. So people scream and can't wait to go to political conventions and wear the buttons and have the bumper stickers. But in reality, everything is about power and controlling you. Only we've just made it easy for them. Smart dust.
like confetti in everything. So I think it's increasingly hard for human beings to work out how to deal with that. And the only way I can see is that we've got to securitize this problem. Computer security industry is it's been engaged in outrageous securitization for a very long period of time, hyping up threats, etc. I get how the game is played. It needs to be securitized in a different way. We need to securitize by securitize I mean you turn something into a threat and thereby change behavior or get economic gain from it. So we need to securitize the threat to elites by these developments. The people who run these companies, it's a threat to them. It's a threat to the most powerful people in society. And to eliminate the notion that there's a place that powerful people can hide from, or skilled people can hide from this phenomenon. And that's the way to get all those people who have an ability to make a difference, to make a difference.
Which is where they cut them off. And that's the end of it. So we can fix things. We just have to decide that we want to. We have to figure out if having 2020 vision is necessary before we have a 2020. We have to decide, I like a different tardigrade right there. If it's even concerning, the fact that the man who actually is connecting together all the dots, the man that has more data than any security agency that connects more dots together, that can kind of see what's happening, and Elon Musk are saying that we should be at red alert. Now is not a time to rally with your base and wave blue, which is waving for neoliberalism, corporate control, not waving red, which is waving for neoliberal corporatism control. But it's a time to think. Do we really want to stick around? Do we want to keep this human thing going? Is it worth it? Do we want to build a better world for our kids, or we want to keep fighting, pretending that we actually make it out of here, rolling out AI that will take everything? Look at the fact that tardigrades exist. We're not the only game in town. Civilizations should be all over this galaxy, and they probably are. But there is that possibility that they don't come here because they all go extinct. Because they all have the same systemic problem we do, which is what all the ancient texts pretty much wrote about. That Armageddon always comes and we always end up dying. Because we spent our entire civilization fighting each other over oil, food, water, and land, race, religion, and every dumb idea we can come up with, because we're being farmed by the psychopaths at the top who just want to collect more than what we have. Slaves, chains and whips, captives, 40 hours a week of working for the rulers. That's what we do, Rebecca, because we are being farmed. Tinfoil hats for everybody to save their minds. No shite. Carolyn, that's where we are. I wear my tinfoil hat proudly. Because there can't be any secrets anymore. Not if we're going to survive, not if we get to make it. If we can't see clearly the threats to the human race, we have no option but to go extinct. We have no option but to destroy this planet. Sure, I wish the aliens would come save us. But they haven't. Why haven't they? Why haven't they showed up? Probably for the same reason we don't go save the ants in an anthill during a flood. Big flood is coming. Big rainstorm is coming. Do you go out on your yard and start covering up the anthills from the tornado and the rainstorms? No, you don't. They're just ants. And I think civilization might be like that all over the galaxy. If anybody's going to save us, it has to be us. And if we don't want to do it, we go extinct. And maybe the next generation can do it. All right. That is what I got. I wanted to make sure I played it. I appreciate it, Rebecca. I wanted to hear it again, too. I started listening to him, and I was like, wow, man, the deep stuff that Assange puts out there. It's quite important that you listen to him. And you don't ever let his words go silent. They silenced him. But we don't have to let his words go silent. You know, he paid a price, a life price for the human race, for you, for me. And it's our obligation to continue to push forward with that. It's our obligation, if we can, to free him. We're going to have to let go of this whole he's a traitor nonsense. It's time to grow up. It's time to grow up and think about what we're really facing, what we're really up against, and the amount of people it's going to actually take to fix it. This is why I call it a stand down. You need everybody. You need everybody. Everybody has to be included in the decisions and solutions going forward. That's the only way you stand down the powers that run this world, the powers that we don't even know what they are. Our chakra is our savior. I hear you, Carolyn. It breaks my heart that the greatest threat to humanity are humans themselves. It is, Kia, but I think it also is poetic in a way, because it kind of explains to us that if we don't get it together, we're not actually supposed to make it out into the universe. We shouldn't exist. I think it kind of makes sense in a way, right? Because if we don't grow up, the universe shouldn't get our infection of greed, our infection of turning on each other, our lack of sentience, our inability to look past where we were born and what we were born as to do the right thing for our own species. So it's kind of poetic in a way, and it kind of makes sense. You know, if ecosystems are balanced here on the earth, then ecosystems have to be balanced from planet to planet, solar system to solar system. Only balanced things get to make it. Imbalances, they got to die. And as of yet, the human race has only pointed out to everything that it's an imbalance, it's a cancer, it's a virus, it's violent, it shouldn't exist. I said in a post earlier, if we've got 2-year-olds of our own species getting out of cars with their hands up, walking in front of armed men, we shouldn't exist. That's not anything that should continue. All right, I gotta get going. This is Gerard. Love y'all. Y'all have a good day.